Another grim milestone, more than 1,500 dead in a day, a new record in this pandemic. And it's not hard to see why. Emily has another compelling eyewitness account from the NHS intensive care front line.
There are no more intensive care nurses to be found. We don't have a secret supply of them. There is no cavalry. This is what we have to endeavour to do.
But there are some signs hospital admissions may be levelling off. Also on News at 10 tonight. Now the Prime Minister promises round-the-clock vaccinations, but is there enough supply? One of the government's chief scientific advisors suggests the current lockdown measures may be strict enough after all.
I think what we know now, which we didn't know a few weeks ago, was would these sorts of restrictions be enough to bring this virus under control with the new variant? And the answer is yes, it looks like it is.
Trump is the first president in US history to be impeached twice as the Capitol building is occupied by soldiers for the first time since the Civil War.
Capitol Hill now resembles the green zone in Baghdad. All avenues to Congress are blocked. In fact, there will soon be more US troops in this city than in Iraq and Afghanistan combined.
We're agreed that the killer wore gloves, yes? We look for textile fibres.
And the story behind the hit ITV drama that concluded tonight, the Pembrokeshire murders, and the forensic scientist who cracked the case.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Through the pandemic, we have reported some truly awful statistics and filmed many distressing scenes, of course, inside hospital intensive care units. Tonight, very sadly, we have the worst of both worlds. The daily number of dead was the biggest yet, more than 1,500, which means more people have died in this second wave than in the first. Many have struggled for life in hard-pressed intensive care units. Today, we were allowed inside one such. Like the number of deaths, everything is more extreme than it was in the spring. Almost all the patients in London's Royal Free Hospital are on ventilators. They are younger and there are more of them, nearly 3 times the number. Nationally, there are 70% more COVID patients than there were in the spring. The Prime Minister said today there is a very substantial risk that intensive care will be overwhelmed.
Can be made to get up.
Yeah.
We're going to have to paralyse and brain him again.
Can I help you with a little bit of a shake? Okay, first we can clear some of that stuff off your lung.
Lucas is massaging his patient's lungs.
Good man.
He's a physiotherapist in intensive care. We're at the Royal Free in London, where 84 of the 90 patients here are on ventilators.
There's just so many people to be seen, and as soon as one person leaves, there seems to just be someone comes straight back in. Staff-wise, we're stretched. We're working probably the hardest we're ever going to work in our careers.
Day 11, they've got a good old amount of time to be on a ventilator. We've got all ages and sizes, variety of backgrounds, of social backgrounds, medical backgrounds.
In fact, most here today are in their 50s. The consultant also tells me it's not the volume of patients that's the concern, but staff.
There are no more intensive care nurses to be found. We don't have a secret supply of them. We simply have to use the nurses we've got. There is no cavalry. This is what we have to endeavour to do.
Nurses usually look after one patient. Today they have 4, and NASA is usually a paediatric occupational therapist.
We wouldn't normally be here. It's a completely different environment than we work in, but I think with the pressure and everything that's going on, they just need extra helping hands.
We can perhaps have a discussion almost face to face and explain how precarious things are.
Whilst we were there, things were not looking good for one of Dr. Ward's patients. He had to update the family on the phone. Such conversations are now sadly routine.
We've seen pictures like this from inside intensive care since last March. Patient after patient lined up on ventilators, but doctors here do not want people to become immune to this site. This is not normal. It's horrific for patients and for staff.
Good man.
None of the patients was well enough to speak to us. They are all on new treatment, steroids, anti-inflammatories and antibiotics. It means pharmacists too are finding it hard to keep up with demand.
Where there's a bay of 2, you've got 3 patients in there, it just makes it a bit more manic. And in terms of the supply thing, trying to get the medications that people need, it's just vast quantities that we're going through. I've never seen anything like this before, if I'm being completely honest.
Given that you're at 90 patients now, though, is the worry that you're going to have to make more difficult decisions about whether to admit someone here or not?
I think it's very much a doomsday scenario, and I don't think we're there at this point. At the moment, if you need an intensive care bed, there is an intensive care bed available, but delivering it is not easy and is not straightforward at the moment.
Every day the hospital has had to find enough staff to work here. 200 have been redeployed, causing huge disruption elsewhere.
We have had to step down some surgeries, quite a lot of surgery, and some diagnostic testing, and nobody likes doing that. It's really upsetting to have to stand that down in the face of this massive, massive wave of patients. Has been really difficult.
No one here is surprised by the numbers of people dying from COVID. They're seeing so many very sick patients and expect to treat many, many more. Emily Morgan, News at 10 at the Royal Free Hospital in London.
Well, we've seen those scenes so often, but it doesn't get any easier. Emily reporting there on the pressures inside the intensive care unit at London's Royal Free Hospital and the perseverance of its staff. Now, as we've said many times, it is the vaccines that can get us out of this waking nightmare. The number of people to have the jab ticked up to 2.6 million. And today, the Prime Minister said they will be offered now around the clock, day and night, as soon as supplies allow. The makers of the Oxford vaccine, AstraZeneca, said they soon hope to be providing 2 million doses a week. But will that be enough?
At this care home in Birmingham, the vaccine has finally arrived. And each dose should do what no amount of PPE ever can, protecting every person that receives it from severe disease. But with just a quarter of care home residents vaccinated and others waiting too, the government is under increasing pressure to speed up the process.
Can the Prime Minister tell us when will the 24/7 vaccine centres be open to the public, because I understand they're not at the moment, and when will they be rolled out across the country?
I can tell him that we'll be going to 24/7 as soon as we can, and my rival friend, the Health Secretary, will be setting out more about that in due course.
It was announced too that from tomorrow, 200 pharmacies like this one in Macclesfield will begin offering the vaccine to those eligible. But the extra capacity only makes a difference if the jabs are available, and it's their supply that's currently limiting the speed of the rollout.
Any manufacturing process, especially one where you're dealing with a biological compound, a novel vaccine, is lumpy at the outset, and there's no doubt that it was, but getting better. So I now have line of sight of deliveries all the way through till end of February.
The government has set a target of giving the first dose of the vaccine to around 15 million people by mid-February. As of yesterday, around 2.6 million have been vaccinated in the UK. To hit the target, roughly 375,000 people now need to be vaccinated every day. But the latest daily total was a little over 207,000. At that rate, it would take until the second week of March to reach 15 million. The plan relies heavily on 2 million doses a week of vaccine from drug maker AstraZeneca. But today, its executives told MPs that number hasn't been reached yet and won't be going much beyond it even after the February target has passed.
We can't commit to a number above 2 million, but obviously it may be possible, as those process optimisation efforts bear fruit, to increase that somewhat as we move into Q2.
While the numbers look very close, the government does have supplies of the Pfizer vaccine to draw on too. It maintains it's on track to meet its target of vaccinating the remaining 12 million or so of those most vulnerable to severe COVID just 33 days from now. Tom Clark, News at 10.
Well, analysis of the latest cases suggests there is a bit of a flattening off in the numbers in some parts of the country anyway. Both the Prime Minister and his chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, said as much today. Sir Patrick said the current restrictions in England may yet be enough. But Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, isn't waiting to find out. She's toughening up the rules on takeaways, on click and collect and alcohol outdoors.
Life just got that bit harder for the Scottish hospitality sector. From Saturday, takeaway customers will be stopped from entering premises. Drinking alcohol in public spaces will be banned. Click and collect services will also be limited to essential goods only.
These additional measures, in further reducing the interactions that allow the virus to spread, will help our essential efforts to suppress it. And of course, however technical the changes might sound, I know that all of them involve further restrictions on our essential liberties. So I want to give an assurance again that none of these decisions are arrived at lightly.
But they all make it tougher for businesses to survive.
Just feel the noose tightening on our livelihood even further. So far in the last 6-7 months, we've lost 80% of our company. We've lost over 60% of our staff.
In St Albans in Hertfordshire, there may be some appetite for further restrictions.
I do think they should be tougher, yeah, and I should think people should pay a lot more attention to it because people clearly aren't really paying much attention to it now.
This strain has changed things, and I think it would be good to review the situation now.
But the government is waiting to see how the current English lockdown works before telling people any more of daily life must be stopped, even though the Prime Minister had this assessment of the state of the NHS.
I think the strain is colossal. There are about 32,000 COVID inpatients, and we have to keep the pressure off the NHS, and the only way to do that is to follow the current lockdown, and that's what I'd urge everybody to do.
In fact, just about everybody says they are. 96% of people say they're complying with the rules for the majority of the time. For example, 93% say they always wear a face mask where recommended. Overall, though, just 74% said they broadly understood the rules, and a mere 27% claim a complete understanding of them. But the latest scientific advice is that the current restrictions in England are having an effect.
I think what we know now, which we didn't know a few weeks ago, was would these sorts of restrictions be enough to bring this virus under control with the new variant? And the answer is yes, it looks like it is, and things are at least flattening off in some places, not everywhere. Some places are still going up.
But to relieve the pressure on the NHS, the numbers will have to come down, and that could yet mean more restrictions are on their way. Carl Dinnan, News at 10.
Well, Sir Patrick Vallance, who we just saw in Carl's report there, was talking, of course, to Robert for his Peston programme tonight, which is on just after this. And Robert joins us now. Robert, look, as we understand it, the priority groups, all 9 of them, are supposed to be done if the government schedule sticks to plan by April. So does that mean we can expect all restrictions to be gone by April? How do you see it unfolding?
OK, I think let's just jog back a bit. So the top 4 categories are supposed to be vaccinated, or at least get their first dose by the middle of February. Now, 2 or 3 weeks after that, the risk of those people getting acutely ill is supposed to diminish very, very significantly. So there are Tory MPs who are saying by March the 8th or so, very significant there should be very significant easing of the restrictions on our lives. The problem is that those who are between 60 and 70 won't have been vaccinated, and lots of those people, when they get ill, end up in hospital. And if the aim of or part of this is not only to stop people dying, it is also to ease pressure on the health service, then you can't very significantly ease the lockdown restrictions until at least those people who are 60 and over are vaccinated. Then there's a separate complication, which is one I talked about with Patrick Vallance, and you can hear us details of that in just a few minutes on the show, where there is a risk that mutations might emerge. that the current vaccines wouldn't work terribly effectively on. Now, they don't think the risk of that is high in the short term, but they certainly think, as he says, there is a very significant risk of that in the years ahead. All of which, I suppose, is a way of saying what I quite often say to you is none of us really know. Things are definitely going to get better as a result of these vaccines. I think it's very unlikely life is going to feel normal in the way that, you know, we're going to get back to the way we lived for months, possibly, years, months or years. I'm sorry, a little bit rambling, but I'm afraid the news isn't great.
We got there. We got both those facts. The news is not great, but Robert, thank you very much, as ever. Now, from the moment he entered the White House to these final frantic days, Donald Trump has turned convention and indeed 2 centuries of presidential history on its head. Now his presidency is to end in further infamy. He has tonight become the first president to be impeached twice. The lower house of Congress voted for it in the past hour. Next stop, the upper house, the Senate. To drive Mr. Trump out of office takes 2/3 of senators to agree. Some from his own party look like they will join the opposition Democrats, but will it be enough?
As impeachment reaches its dramatic climax in Congress tonight, Capitol Hill is beginning to resemble the Green Zone in Baghdad. It has the feel of a military garrison. Inside, Congress has just delivered perhaps the most stinging single rebuke to a president in U.S. history.
On this vote, the ayes are 232, the nays are 197. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
An unprecedented second impeachment. Democrats argued with passion that future presidents must understand a red line has been crossed.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation.
It is time to hold this president accountable. The president of the United States is an insurrectionist.
This was not a protest. This was an insurrection.
This is a moment of truth, my friends. Are you on the side of chaos and the mob, or on the side of constitutional democracy and our freedom?
10 Republicans voted with the Democrats, and few defended Donald Trump, arguing only that impeachment will further divide an already ruptured country.
The majority should be taking steps to unite us. Instead, they are only dividing us further.
We must seek out issues to work on that unite us, rather than issues that further divide us.
It will only serve to further divide a nation that is calling out for healing.
And this is frightening for the country. We should defeat this rule, and we should defeat the impeachment resolution.
The president returned from Texas last night and has only issued a written statement urging his supporters not to engage in further violence and vandalism.
That call may or may not be heard by his loyalists, but it is difficult to imagine there can be further political violence in Washington. This city currently has deployed in it more US troops than in Iraq and Afghanistan combined.
Those wild scenes from last Wednesday have shaken America to its core, with many recognizing only now there is real danger in far-right extremism from within. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi inspected troops this morning in these final volatile days of the Trump presidency. And for the first time since the Civil War, troops are sleeping within the Capitol building itself, 7 days after Congress was stormed. Donald Trump's presidency is ending in ignominy and with National Guardsmen on the streets of the Capitol. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
And Emma joins us now from outside the Capitol building. Emma, those scenes still, I think, take all of our breath away. Remarkable to witness the kind of Capitol building flooded with troops. The president impeached for the second time today, but where do we go from here?
Well, what we know is that we will not be going to the Senate in the next 7 days, which had been the hope of some of those who were seeking to get this through very quickly, to get to that second stage and potentially get him out of office before the next Wednesday. But that's not going to happen. Mitch McConnell has said he will not do that quickly. So basically where we go from here is that Donald Trump remains the president of this country in power until Joe Biden takes over. Why will they still press ahead? Well, the need to get this to the Senate and the need to get that 2/3 majority is to try and stop him ever standing for office again. And that is something that the Democrats seriously want to achieve. And they may well have some Republican support. It will be really telling what happens in the next 7 days as to how many Republican votes they're going to be able to garner in order to try and get that across the line. What's really struck me today is just how impassioned the speeches were from those politicians. They were shaken to the core. And though only 10 Republicans actually voted to impeach, I'm told that many more would have done, but were terrified for their own safety when they leave the garrison that is now Washington, D.C.
It's a telling line, Emma. Thank you very much indeed. All right, well, back here, the Manchester United footballer Marcus Rashford has scored again against the government in his school meals campaign. He and others have persuaded ministers to offer, from next week, food vouchers to children who normally get free school meals but who are currently stuck at home. The player, and many others too, encouraged the change of heart by tweeting pictures of lunches that even the Prime Minister called disgraceful and appalling. Empty shelves in supermarkets in Northern Ireland tell their own story. Food supplies heading there from Great Britain are getting caught up in post-Brexit bureaucracy after the end of the transition period on New Year's Eve. Now, many experts believe the hold-ups are easing now. The Prime Minister described them as just teething problems, but try telling that to Northern Irish businesses struggling to get hold of stock.
The early morning ferry rolls in, a crossing centuries old that in the last fortnight has become commercially disastrous. Extensive customs checks on UK goods, seen as imports from outside the EU, mean delayed consignments and often nothing to transport.
This is just another empty truck coming back from Great Britain to Northern Ireland.
Without these vehicles returning, Northern Irish exports would fall apart too, but hauliers are losing tens of thousands of pounds a week.
I'm shocked at how bad it's been in the first week, so I can't believe that we're actually in the position of needing SPS checks, that's the certificates for health for foodstuffs, and customs for moving basic food commodities from one region of the United Kingdom to another.
It took me 6.25 hours to bring that load into port.
Albert's frustrations are mirrored by supermarkets, who warn unless the EU extends the grace period in the Brexit agreement, there will be fresh shortages on Northern Irish shelves and more dissatisfaction.
Vegetables, they had no vegetables, the prepackaged stuff in there today. The shelves are, well, there's whole lanes that are bare.
That's despite supermarkets being exempt temporarily from groupage when lorries group together goods from different manufacturers. Each set must now be resealed and recertified at every pickup point, a logistical nightmare. This lunchtime in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister described the issues facing supermarkets and suppliers in Northern Ireland as teething problems. The government also say that they will work to ensure that major online retailers reinstate a normal service. At the moment, many high street names simply won't deliver here.
And here you just have a UK address.
And that's what's stopping that getting in?
That will be, yeah.
For smaller businesses, there are different headaches already.
We've been here now for nearly 40 years and we've weathered storms through the Troubles, through recessions, but this is completely different. There isn't just a small delay on an order. This is no orders right now. The door has been closed.
There was some good news, though, in another sector. A punitive 20% tax rise on used car sales dropped.
Potentially it'll save the business. As of yesterday, we were out of business if it kept going the way it was, but we need to find out more information from it, and at the minute we have no supply, so our suppliers need to have more confidence in selling to Northern Ireland as well.
One problem seemingly ironed out then, but many remain, which won't be as simple to solve. Richard Pallow, News at 10, Belfast.
Well, now to a presidential election in which politics, the pandemic and pop music have collided. It is taking place tomorrow in, yes, you guessed it, Uganda, where President Museveni has been in power for 35 years. His challenger, Bobi Wine, is the country's leading pop star. His campaigning has been officially curtailed to stop the spread of the virus. The president's has not.
It looks more like an invading army driving through the streets of the Ugandan capital, Kampala. But this is the country's own army, patrolling on the eve of what should be a free and fair presidential election. And all because of this man, the most unlikely challenger to one of Africa's longest-reigning autocratic leaders. Robert Kyagulanyi, better known as Bobi Wine, is a 38-year-old Ugandan pop star who wants to be the country's next president. And yet Uganda's presidency is a long way from what this young charismatic musician is used to. He's far more at home on stage in rock concerts, collaborating with other global stars, but he's determined to get there. Yet everywhere he turns, he finds the authorities are in his way and waiting for him.
Even when they chased us to the dusty roads, we're using the dusty roads, still they came and blocked the way.
Right up until the eve of the vote, Bobi Wine has had little opportunity to campaign, focusing instead on just surviving till polling day. He's been repeatedly arrested, shot at, and his rallies broken up by the Ugandan authorities.
Well, I have been wearing a bulletproof vest and a helmet after surviving 2 assassination plots. It's been filmed when the police is hurling a tear gas grenade at me, which I narrowly survived. That propelled me, and my wife insisted that I needed to wear protective gear.
This is the man standing in his way. Yoweri Museveni has ruled Uganda for 35 years, and now he wants a 6th straight term in office.
Some of these groups are being used by outsiders, homosexuals, I don't know what, groups outside there, who don't like the stability of Uganda.
Bobi Wine has seen his supporters beaten and he himself has been targeted. And it would be a seismic moment in modern Africa if the man dubbed the ghetto president is anointed the Ugandan president, ending 35 years of Yoweri Museveni's rule. Bragioma, News at 10.
Finally, if you've been gripped by tonight's final part of the ITV drama The Pembrokeshire Murders, you won't need telling who Dr. Angela Gallup is. For those who haven't yet seen it, she is the brilliant, real-life forensic scientist who helped solve 2 cold case double murders. She found the blood and fibres that convicted John Cooper, known as the Bullseye Killer, after his appearance on the darts-based game show. Today, the real Dr. Gallup told us it was all down to modern DNA analysis.
2 of Wales's most baffling crimes. The murders of Richard and Helen Thomas and Peter and Gwenda Dixon by an unknown killer.
A compelling watch for millions. The investigation and ultimate conviction of a serial killer in Pembrokeshire is a drama that closely follows the true story it tells.
I am not a murderer. I don't care whether you believe it or not. I am not a murderer.
He was lying. But proving John Cooper was the killer 2 decades after he committed the crimes would mean relying on forensic examination of the evidence gathered at the time. The drama introduced viewers to the scientist and the details she found that helped secure the conviction.
And there were some really dramatic moments.
Angela Gallup was the forensic scientist detectives turned to. Her work established the link between Cooper and his victims using techniques that wouldn't have been possible at the time of the initial investigation.
We could have found, it would have been possible to find the tiny amount of blood that we found on the shorts that John Cooper had at the time, but we could not have analysed it.
Her work on the Pembrokeshire murders sits next to other high-profile cases, such as the killings of Stephen Lawrence and Damilola Taylor. And other than finances, she sees no reason why science won't continue to solve the unsolved crimes.
Forensic science obviously reflects the way in which society works and as I say, how we live our lives. And it always will do. And if that changes, then we have to change with it.
Matching an artist's impression of John Cooper with his appearance at the time on the game show Bullseye was a breakthrough. ITV News journalist Jonathan Hill helped find the long-lost episode.
The recording that went out in 1990 was actually recorded in 1989 and just 3 weeks before the murder, which suddenly made this piece of evidence absolutely crucial because it gave the police an image of Cooper exactly at the time of the murders, which was something they just didn't have. There were no photographs of him at the time.
The Pembrokeshire Murders is a television drama of a real story that tells of the desire, whether through detective work or journalistic endeavour, to reveal the truth. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Cardiff.
And that is, I'm afraid, all we've got time for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll see you then. Good night. Thanks for watching.